man and his daughter disappeared during a night dive near the Isla Roja reef. 11 years later, the mother uncovers a truth more haunting than silence. Morning mist clung to the edge of Santa Luz Beach, the waves whispering secrets long buried. Mireya Alvarado stood barefoot at the shoreline, her eyes tracing the horizon where her family had vanished, the tide pulling memories back with every breath of wind. The morning sun cast long golden slashes over the coast of Punta Celeste, washing the sleepy fishing town in warmth that belied the storm stirring in Mireya Alvarado's chest. She walked alone along the shoreline, her sandals dangling from one hand, her bare feet pressing softly into the damp sand. It had been 10 years to the day, 10 long, aching years since Julian and their daughter Neye vanished without a trace during what was supposed to be a routine diving excursion off the turquoise waters of Arroyo Azul. The ocean sparkled indifferently now, the same way it had the morning they disappeared, calm, deceptively beautiful, and utterly unforgiving. Mireya's heart, though dulled by time, carried every weighty second of that day in 2015. When Julian had kissed her cheek at sunrise, Naya had given her a tight, giddy hug, flippers bouncing behind her like little wings, her laughter echoing through the hall of their vacation rental. "We'll be back before noon, Mama, I promise," she'd said, her 14-year-old grin full of salt and sunshine. They never came back. A search party had launched within hours. Mireya had called the Coast Guard after the charter boat returned without them, its deck empty except for 2 half-empty oxygen tanks and a lone dive slate, wiped clean. There were no signs of a struggle, no distress signals, no malfunction reports from their diving gear, nothing. Local fishermen joined the search. Helicopters combed the shoreline, professional divers scoured underwater caves, even international marine units offered assistance. But Arroyo Azul yielded no answers. It was as if the sea had swallowed them whole and left behind not even a ripple. Now, at 49, Mireya's skin bore more lines. Her dark eyes were sharper, almost hawk-like, from a decade of scanning waves for signs, any sign. Her once vibrant career as a marine ecologist had long been set aside, replaced by volunteer environmental work that kept her close to the shore, but never too close. She hadn't set foot in the water since that day. She crouched near a patch of washed-up seagrass, mechanically sorting through debris. Plastic caps, driftwood, treps, a glint of glass caught her eye. At first glance it looked like any discarded snorkel gear, a broken mask covered in barnacles and sand, but as she turned it in her hand, something strange caught her breath. Inside the lens, fogged but intact, were letters. Hand-scratched into the polycarbonate with what must have been a knife or stone. They read, "She's still here, J." Mireya's heart plummeted. The initials, the implication. Her fingers trembled as she wiped at the lens, confirming it wasn't a trick of light. The carving was real, unmistakably deliberate. J.A. Julian Alvarado. Could it be a cruel prank? A coincidence? But how could anyone else know to write that? And she, did that mean Naya? Still here? As in alive? She stumbled backward, the mask clutched to her chest, and let the ocean breeze whip around her. Her mind swirled. For years she had chased shadows, tip lines, washed-up shoes, vague sightings on obscure forums. But nothing like this, nothing so personal, so chilling. That night, Mireya couldn't sleep. The mask sat on the table under a desk lamp, the message staring back at her like a ghost. She Googled the tides and currents around Punta Celeste. If the mask had washed ashore here, it could have drifted from the south, from the chain of small, mostly uninhabited dive maps, tracing her finger across routes she once knew by heart. Her pulse quickened. Could it be a clue? The next morning, she boarded a bus to the capital to visit her old friend and former dive colleague, Mateo. He ran a diving gear repair shop now, quiet, humble, but full of old connections. Mateo examined the mask with a quiet reverence. This model was discontinued in 2016, he said. Custom strap, reinforced buckle, definitely military spec, or special issue. Mireya stiffened. Julian had once consulted with marine rescue teams. He'd had access to gear like this. Could it be his? She asked, her voice a whisper. Mateo looked up at her slowly. If it is, Mireya, then you've just reopened something people gave up on a long time ago. But Mireya had never given up. She had just stopped saying it out loud. By the afternoon, the mask was bagged and photographed. Mateo promised to run serial numbers through the window of a small cafe across the road. 10 years ago, she had stood on another shore, waiting for her family to return. Today she felt, for the first time in a decade, that maybe, just maybe, someone was calling her back. At dusk she returned to the beach and sat quietly, mask in hand, whispering into the wind. But Mireya knew better than to trust the quiet. The following morning, Mireya found herself staring at the dusty hallway of the old police precinct in Santo Amaro, the very building she had walked through dozens of times during those anguished early weeks after Julian and Naya vanished. Time hadn't been kind to the station. Paint peeled from the walls. The waiting room chairs looked as if they'd lost hope too, but it wasn't the building that made Mireya hesitate at the door. His name on the frosted glass, G. Santos, lead investigator. Her hand lingered on the doorknob longer than it should have. She knew who Gabriel Santos was. He had been the face of the investigation in 2015, sharp-jawed, freshly promoted, the kind of detective who made headlines just by existing in uniform. Back then, he'd spoken to the press with composure, looked Mireya in the eyes, and said they'd find her family. But then weeks turned to months, and his calls slowed, his tone shifted, and eventually he had said the words that shattered her. "You should prepare yourself, Mrs. Alvarado. The ocean doesn't give back what it takes." She had left that meeting with shaking hands and a hollow chest, and now here she was again. She knocked twice before pushing open the door. Gabriel looked up from a stack of paper, eyes older than she remembered, the crinkles around them deeper, more tired. "Mireya," he said with mild surprise, standing slowly. "It's been a while." 10 years, she replied curtly, placing the dive mask on his desk with a quiet thunk. His eyes narrowed as he leaned in, adjusting his glasses. He picked it up slowly, turned it, and then he saw the carving. "She's still here," he murmured, brows furrowing. "J?" "Julian's initials," Mireya said. "Found it yesterday on the beach at Punta Celeste." Gabriel sat down, pressing his lips together. "You think it's legit?" "I don't know," she said. "That's why I'm here." He studied her in silence, then the mask again, then her once more. "This model," he muttered, flipping it over, "was never sold commercially. This is military grade." Maria's pulse jumped. "You're sure?" "Positive," he said. "Reinforced lens, titanium frame, integrated HUD mount." "It's not for tourists." Carol's eyes sharpened. Not unless he was more than just a diving guide. Mireya hesitated. He did some consulting for Marine Rescue. He had friends in the Naval Reserve, but he never talked about it much. Gabrielle exhaled slowly and leaned back. "That man didn't just disappear, Mireya. He slipped off the grid. That's different." She bristled. "You think he faked it?" "No," Gabriel replied. "I think he may have gotten into something bigger than anyone knew. And this," he tapped the mask, "this changes things." But even as he said it, Mireya noticed something behind his eyes. A weariness, a reluctance. "Why do I feel like you already knew?" she asked. "About his past, about this mask." Gabriel didn't answer at first. Then he pulled a file from a drawer, thick with yellowing pages and clipped reports. He flipped to a section she hadn't seen before. Surveillance logs. Black and white photos of Julian in various ports. "After you stopped hearing from me, we kept digging," he admitted. Julian's name came up in an investigation connected to smuggling routes between Aruba and Isla Sombra. But the department pulled back. Mireya's breath hitched. "Why?" "Lack of evidence," Gabriel said, then added, quieter, "and pressure from someone above." Officially, the case went cold, but unofficially, I kept watching. He slid a grainy image across the desk. Julian at a marina shaking hands with a man whose face was partially turned. "That photo was taken 3 months before the disappearance," Gabrielle said. "Your husband was possibly surveilling cartel neck dive teams or supplying them." Mireya stared at the image, a whirl of betrayal and disbelief rising in her chest. "He would have told me," she whispered. "With a lie." "Maybe he didn't lie," Gabriel said gently. "Maybe he thought he was protecting you." She stood suddenly, pacing the room. "You never told me any of this. You let me believe they drowned." "I had no proof," he said, "and hope can be cruel when it's baseless." "And now?" she challenged. "Now that there's something?" He shrugged. "I'm no longer on the force. I consult now. I write reports, advise on old cases. Nobody wants to reopen a 10-year ghost story." Mireya stared at him. "But you still care." It wasn't a question. "I do," he said after a pause, "but I've learned not to expect miracles." She lifted the mask again. "Then let me expect them." Later that evening, Mireya returned to her small rental flat and spread out every map, photo, and document she had ever saved. She dug up Julian's old notebooks, his GPS routes, his dive logs. In one of them, dated 3 weeks before the disappearance, she found a note scribbled in the margin beside a depth chart. She stared at it for a long time. Isla Sombra, the same name Gabriel had mentioned, the same direction the currents would carry something from Arroyo Azul to Punta Celeste. She opened her laptop and began searching, not the tourism sites, the classified geology forums, the deep sea navigation groups, the obscure Reddit threads about abandoned military operations in the Caribbean. Patterns began to emerge, mentions of red sand coves, of hidden beacons, of Thursday night flashes. One user claimed to have seen a red light blinking underwater near Isla Sombra, but the post had been removed days later. Mireya knew then what she had to do. She reopened the dusty backpack Julian used to take on dives, dug out the waterproof case she hadn't touched in a decade, and began packing. If Julian had been part of something more, if Naya was truly still alive, then this was no longer about grief. This was about unfinished truth, and she would not let it die quietly. Back at the precinct, Gabriel stared long into the night at the photograph of Julian shaking hands. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a second image, this one dated a week later. A different marina, the same man, and behind him, barely visible, a girl with a familiar profile, back in her childhood home, where the walls still held the scent of old citrus polish and sea salt. Mireya opened the storage trunk that had remained sealed for the past 10 years. The house had been locked away like a time capsule. Julian's dive medals still hung on the wall, dust-coated but gleaming faintly under the filtered afternoon light. She hadn't dared enter this space since the disappearance, afraid of the avalanche of memory that might swallow her. But now something had shifted. The dive mask had cracked open a door, and she could no longer look away. As she opened the lid of the trunk, a rush of air carried the familiar scent of mildew and salt-drenched paper. Inside, among old wetsuits and family photos, she found Julian's toolkit, the same one he used to repair gear after every dive. Something about the mask had been bothering her since Gabriel mentioned its specs. Mireya carefully unscrewed the metal rim with the small hex key from Julian's toolset, her fingers steady despite her pounding heart. As the frame loosened, a thin layer of composite peeled away from inside the mask's side panel. Tucked between the layers was a crumpled piece of plastic film, translucent, barely larger than a playing card. She unfolded it slowly. Her breath hitched. The film was a map, but not one anyone would find on Google Earth. It was hand-drawn, with currents sketched in thin, dark strokes, annotated with tiny notes in Julian's handmarks. Depths, drift patterns, eddies. The focal point was an irregular dot surrounded by elliptical tide marks, labeled. Mireya pressed her hand to her mouth. Isla Sombra, the same unlisted island that had surfaced in Gabriel's case files. Julian had charted a path toward it using ocean currents. The arrows showed movement from Arroyo Azul to Sombra over an estimated 5-day drift. This wasn't a random note. This was a contingency plan. Heart racing, she set the map aside and turned to the rest of the trunk. Under a faded towel, she found one of Nayea's sketchbooks. The cover was water-damaged, the spine fraying, but her daughter's initials, N.A., were still etched in gel pen across the front. Mireya opened it, hands trembling. Each page transported her to a time long gone, drawings of sea turtles, sketches of coral fans, watercolor sunsets. Naya had been an artist even at 14, her drawings full of life and detail. Then, near the end of the book, the tone shifted. Pages became more symbolic, mazes, waves, spirals, almost coded, and on the very last page, in colored pencil, was a simple sentence. "One day, Mama will see the red light. only on Fridays. Mireya froze. She ran her finger across the words. The letters were shaky, uneven, as though drawn in low light or with a trembling hand. But the intent was clear. Naya had left a message, a signal. Her voice stretched across time. Red light. Frida's. Combined with the map from Julian, the implications twisted inside Mireya like a tidal knot. Red light. Could it be a beacon? A signal flare? Something timed to an event? Her mind flashed back to those scrubbed Reddit threads about underwater lights near Isla Sombra. She reached for her laptop and opened the old marine forums again, now with sharpened eyes. One diver had written about a strange red blink in the depths near Sombra that repeated weekly every Friday night, right after sundown. The post had since been deleted, but she had screen-capped it years ago, thinking it was nonsense. Not anymore. Back in the kitchen, she spread out the plastic map beside Naya's sketchbook and Julian's dive notes. Everything aligned. The currents, the island, the dates. This wasn't coincidence. This was a message embedded across time by two people who knew she would never stop looking. She stood, her spine straightening as clarity replaced confusion. That night, she called Gabriel. "I need you to look at something," she said. An hour later, he arrived with a notebook and thermos, clearly expecting a debate. But the moment he saw the layered evidence, Julian's map, Naya's message, the deleted online sighting, his jaw tightened. "Bessesen coordinated," he said. "They were working together. He was protecting her. Or hiding her," Mireya added quietly. Gabriel didn't argue. He leaned over the map again. "These currents. This could actually work. If you launched a floating object from Arroyo Azul, the drift would carry it to Punta Celeste in 5 to 6 days, depending on tide cycles." "And it's been 10 years, Mireya said. "What are the odds the pattern still holds?" "Slim," he admitted. "But not zero." They sat in silence, the map between them like a live wire. "I want to go to Isla Sombra," Mireya said. "You won't get clearance," Gabriel said. "It's restricted. Former naval grounds. Nobody goes there without permits." "Then I'll go around the rules," she said simply. "Like Julian did." Gabriel shook his head. "It's dangerous. If there's something still happening there, if Naya's still there, whoever's running it won't let her go easily." Mireya didn't blink. "Then I'll go prepared." She spent the next 3 days collecting data, contacting old contacts from her marine biology network, even calling in a favor from a former student who now worked with a private oceanic surveillance group. Bit by bit, she assembled a picture of Isla Sombra's perimeter. Shallow reefs, one natural bay, and a rocky bluff on the western side, rumored to have a cave system. The red light could be from there. Friday was 2 days away. On the eve of her planned trip, she returned to the house one last time to gather gear. In the hall closet, behind a rack of Julian's jackets, she found a folded poncho. Inside the pocket was a memory card. When she inserted it into her camera, it revealed a single photo. Julian and Naya, standing on a dock, both in dive gear. Behind them was a boat with an unfamiliar name, La Isla Roja. The Red Star. Mireya zoomed in. The photo had metadata, time-stamped April 17, 2015, a Friday. She whispered the word aloud, red. Her heart kicked. Maybe the light wasn't just a beacon, maybe it was a name, a code, a ship. Then, just as she reached to close the file, her phone vibrated. "Gabriel." "You need to see this," he said. His voice was taut. "There's a satellite image from yesterday. You're not going to believe what's blinking off the coast of Isla." The satellite image Gabriel sent showed a flicker, an unmistakable red blink captured from space, pulsing from the western edge of Isla Sombra just after dusk the previous Friday. It was faint, but it repeated in an exact 90-second interval. Not natural, not accidental. Mireya stared at the photo for nearly 10 minutes before finally dialing Gabriel again. "We go now," she said. "We're already behind." Within 24 hours, they boarded a chartered vessel from a private marina in La Romana. It wasn't legal, and Mireya knew that, but permits would take weeks, and she didn't have weeks. Gabriel, to her surprise, had agreed to come. He said it was for safety. She suspected it was for something else, a reason he hadn't yet voiced. The crossing was tense. The captain, a grizzled man named Oseel who rarely spoke, warned them not to approach from the north, where sharp coral spires tore through hulls like tin. Instead, they circled wide and approached the southern bluff under cover of early dawn, hoping the dim light would conceal them. Isla Sombra was smaller than she imagined, densely overgrown with a thick jungle heart and cliffs flanking much of its coast. The western cove, however, offered a narrow strip of sand that curved gently inland, and that's where they landed. The air was heavy with humidity, and the cries of unseen birds echoed from the trees. They moved inland quickly, GPS in hand, using the coordinate overlay from the satellite image. About half a mile in, the brush opened into a clearing. An old hut stood in the center, its roof patched with palm leaves, smoke curling faintly from a tin chimney. A woman emerged, stooped, wrinkled, eyes like wet coal, leaning on a cane that had clearly seen generations pass. She stared at Mireya without surprise, as if she had been expecting her. "Came from the red path," she said in Spanish. "He told me someone would." Gabriel exchanged a sharp glance with Mireya. Mireya stepped forward. "Who told you?" "The man with the eyes like silver fish," the woman said. "The one who carried the girl who spoke to stars." Mireya froze. "Girl?" She was small then, the woman went on, but clever, always looking at the sky. She asked about constellations I knew of. Gabriel cleared his throat. "What happened to them?" The woman's gaze sharpened. They were hunted. Men in black boats came one night, loud, angry. They chased him through the rocks. He ran toward the sea. The girl hid. "I don't know where." Maria's heart pounded. She could barely form the next question. "How long ago?" The woman pointed to a notch on a nearby tree, one of several cuts in a pattern that could only mean one thing. 10 rains, she said, same year the storms took the turtles. 10 years, it aligned. Gabriel stepped back and turned away, as if composing his thoughts. When Mireya looked at him, something unreasonable passed across his face. "You knew something," she accused. "Something more than what you told me." He didn't deny it. "Julian wasn't just on some rescue mission," he admitted. "In 2014 we intercepted a message, encrypted, passed through an underwater relay node near Aruba. It referenced an inside man on the Sombra route. A JA, working as an asset. It matched Julian's timeline. We suspected he was playing both sides." Maria's breath caught. "You thought he was dirty?" "No," Gabriel said. "I thought he was playing a dangerous game, embedded in a trafficking network, maybe passing intel to both the Coast Guard and the DEA, but the trail went cold, and when he vanished, well, some of us assumed the worst." Mireya turned back toward the hut, toward the elderly woman, who was now boiling something in a kettle. "He wasn't the worst," she said, voice low. "He was trying to save them." Gabriel didn't argue. He just looked away, eyes narrowed as if weighing 10 years of silence against what they were about to walk into. Mireya knelt beside the fire pit, pulling out the sketchbook she had brought. "Did the girl leave anything?" she asked the woman. "Marks, carvings, notes?" The woman nodded. "Behind the shack, on stone, but only when the sun hits it." They waited. As noon approached, the light shifted. A slab of coral rock near the back of the hut began to glow faintly under the filtered sun. Mireya knelt and brushed away moss, revealing shallow etchings. A star map, hand-drawn. Beneath it, in small letters, "I follow Orion. Mama will find me." She pressed her fingers to the carving. "It's her. She's still trying to talk to me." Gabriel knelt beside her, running his fingers over the lines. "This isn't just art. It's directional. She's marking something." Mireya stood. "Then we follow the stars." They camped that night by the hut, watching the western sky. As the last light faded, Mireya saw it, a distant red blink on the far horizon just above the waterline. Faint, but real. Gabriel saw it too. Same interval as the satellite image, he confirmed. 90 seconds. Repeating. "She's signaling," Mireya whispered. "She's telling me where." And then, in the silence that followed, they heard a voice, thin, frightened, somewhere beyond the trees. The voice vanished as quickly as it had come, swallowed by the rustling trees and the low hum of nocturnal insects. Mireya and Gabriel froze, eyes locked, adrenaline surging. Gabriel raised a hand to quiet her, motioning toward the denser brush near the direction of the sound. They advanced slowly, breath shallow, until they reached a crumbling stone arch overgrown with vines. Beyond it stood what looked like the remnants of an old naval outpost, abandoned, moss-laced, but intact. A rusted sign still hung crooked over the entrance, its faded lettering in Spanish warning, "Accexit only." Inside the compound, past shattered windows and rusted lockers, Mireya discovered an old communications room. The radio console, coated in a thick layer of dust, bore the insignia of the Caribbean Naval Confederation, an initiative Julian once mentioned briefly years ago. Gabriel tried the dials. The static came alive. Most of these would be long dead, he muttered, adjusting the frequency. But maybe, just maybe, some memories stuck around. He reached into his pack and pulled out a signal booster he'd quietly taken from his consulting firm's surveillance kit. "What are you doing?" Mireya asked. "The mask you found?" he said, glancing at her. "It might have an internal tag. If Julian was using military gear, it's possible he or Naya had something trackable embedded." He connected the booster to a portable scanner and powered it up. The screen flickered, then settled. No signals. He tapped, adjusted. Still nothing. Then suddenly, a faint ping. One blip, then two. Mireya leaned in. The signal wasn't from the mask, but from something nearby. "It's coming from northwest," Gabriel confirmed. "Very low frequency, almost dormant, probably hasn't broadcasted in years." "Can you trace it?" she asked. "We can try," he said, already moving. They followed the signal deeper into the ruins, past a decaying barracks and into a forgotten equipment room. Piles of sea-bleached gear lay scattered across the floor. Behind an old steel locker, Mireya spotted something. A leather cord tangled in rusted netting. She reached down, heart in her throat, and pulled it free. The pendant attached was unmistakable, an oval carved from abalone shell, the initials N.A. Still etched in the back, Naya's necklace. Her fingers trembled as she turned it over. On the underside of the pendant, embedded in the base, was a tiny GPS chip. "This shouldn't be working," Gabriel said, scanning it. "Battery life on these units maxes at a year, maybe 2. This one's been off the grid for over 9. "Then why now?" Mireya asked. "Why here?" Before Gabriel could answer, a beep echoed from the console behind them. They rushed back into the comms room where the scanner was blinking rapidly. Gabriel hit playback and the static hissed, then cleared. A voice came through, young, female, scared. "If anyone hears this, I'm Mireya Alvarado. I'm near the Western Bay. There's a red blink every Friday after dark. That's me. But don't come alone. They're watching. Please, don't come alone." Mireya dropped to her knees, tears welling as the voice repeated. It was her daughter. A decade older, but still unmistakably hers. Gabriel rewound the message, played it again. There was desperation in the tone, but also precision. "She knew someone would come," Mireya whispered. "She planned this slowly, and she knew the risk. She's warning us. Someone else is on this island, watching, possibly armed." They spent the next hour combing the outpost for more clues. In a back closet, under a pile of wet rope and broken crates, Mireya found a torn notebook sealed in a dry bag. The pages inside were smeared, water-damaged, but legible. Drawings. Observations. One entry stood out. Friday, 2100 hours, light blinks. Code confirmed. "I think Mom will understand." Another page, dated 7 months later, was more frantic. "One man in black boat. Noticed I had to stop the beacon early. If they find this station, it's over." Gabriel read over her shoulder, brows knit tight. "She's been sending these for years." "Air alone," Mireya said softly. "All this time." As they gathered supplies to leave, Mireya paused in front of the radio, staring at the controls. "We need to respond," she said. Gabriel frowned. "If they're monitoring frequencies, we don't answer directly," she interrupted. "We let her know we heard her. That help is coming." He hesitated, then set it up. The console repeated the final 5 words of Naya's voice. "Don't come alone, on a loop, low frequency, encrypted." Just enough. They left the building as the sky began to bleed orange with approaching sunset. Mireya clutched the necklace, the notebook, and every ounce of hope she could muster. And as they made their way through the narrowing trail toward the western bluff, the same red light blinked again, once, twice, then vanished into the coming night. The trail to the western bluff narrowed into a crevice between two jagged cliffs, forcing Mireya and Gabriel to crouch low as they navigated through the shadows. The earth here smelled of salt and something else, damp, metallic, faintly sulfuric. The sun had nearly dipped below the horizon, and the flicker of the red light had grown dimmer, as if teasing them into following before darkness claimed the path. Mireya moved with urgency, clutching Naiya's necklace like a compass, driven by the rhythmic cadence of the beacon. They came to a dead end, or so it seemed, until Gabriel noticed a natural fissure in the rock wall, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. He flashed his torch inside. The beam caught on something unexpected, carved patterns glinting against stone. They entered the passage, one after the other, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. The tunnel descended gradually, opening into a chamber that took Mireya's breath away. The ceiling stretched high above them, its surface encrusted with stalactites, but it was the walls that captivated her. Hundreds of etched lines, precise and deliberate, spiraled across the limestone in star-like configuration. Gabriel lifted his flashlight, sweeping it across the carvings. "These aren't random," he said. "They're celestial." Mireya moved closer, tracing her fingers over one cluster. "Orion's belt," she whispered. "Julian used to teach Naya how to navigate using this. He said the stars would never lie." Further along she found the Big Dipper, the Southern Cross, and other constellations, each paired with notes, coordinates, and what appeared to be lunar cycles. This chamber was no accident. It was a map, a code, a survival manual written in the language Julian had passed to Naya years ago. Near the rear of the chamber, another tunnel sloped downward into a darkness so absolute it swallowed their flashlight beams. Gabriel hesitated, but Mireya pressed forward. "She's down here," she said. "I know." The descent was longer than expected. The air cooled drastically, the smell of sea brine intensifying. They emerged into a second cavern, this one echoing with distant murmurs. Mireya held her breath. Voices, faint, childlike. Gabriel pulled her back gently, motioning for silence. They approached slowly, and as they rounded a bend, the scene before them froze them both. A group of children, 7 in total, sat huddled around a small fire built on a raised rock platform. They looked between the ages of 10 and 16, their clothes mismatched and tattered, hair overgrown, eyes wide with both fear and familiarity. One girl stood as she saw Mireya, narrowing her eyes. "You're not one of them," she said in halting Spanish. Mireya stepped forward slowly. "No," she replied. "We're here for someone. Her name is Mireya Alvarado." The girl's face changed instantly. She turned to a boy beside her and whispered rapidly. He nodded, then pointed toward a narrow side passage. "She's not here," the boy said. "She scouts, watches the boats, leaves signals?" "She's the one who made the light," Gabriel asked. The children nodded. "She makes us safe. She learned from him." The girl's voice softened. "The man with silver eyes, the one who taught us to find food, to avoid patrols, to trust the stars. He was like a ghost, came and went. We called him Padre Sombrio." Mireya's chest tightened. "Julian," she breathed. The boy nodded. He said someone would come, that one day the ocean would bring her back. The girl moved closer to Mireya, her eyes scanning her face. "You're her mother," she said. "She always described you. You have her eyes." Tears welled in Mireya's eyes, but she steadied herself. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "Some of us 6 years," the girl replied. "Some less. Naya found most of us after we escaped. She's the one who keeps us together." Gabriel moved to examine the cavern. There were water collection systems built from driftwood and shells, hammocks strung from stone hooks, even a rudimentary map carved into the floor. He looked at the children in disbelief. "She built this?" he asked. "With help," one child said. But the ideas were hers. She remembered everything her father taught her. Mireya knelt, staring at the hand-drawn symbols, the calendar system marked by tide patterns and moon phases. Each mark corresponded to something: supply drops, threat zones, moments of silence. These children had survived not by luck, but by design. "Why didn't you try to leave?" Gabrielle asked. The girl responded, "If we ran too far, they chased." So Mireya changed the plan. Hide in plain sight, wait for a signal, keep the red light going. Maria's voice cracked. "Where is she now?" "She went to check the south ridge," the girl answered. "She said she'd be back before moonrise." Mireya looked at the narrow tunnel leading upward from the far end of the cave. Her fingers tightened around the necklace. And then, somewhere beyond that passage, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed off the rock, followed by a sharp intake of breath. The footsteps drew nearer, soft against the stone, then came to a sudden halt. Mira stood instinctively, heart slamming in her chest, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and hope. From the tunnel emerged a figure, taller than she remembered, made from survival, but unmistakably her daughter. Naya, for a moment, neither moved. Time fractured. It wasn't just a reunion, it was a resurrection. Mireya dropped the necklace and rushed forward, her voice breaking into a cry that caught in her throat. Naya met her halfway, arms flung open, and they collapsed into each other with a force that stole the air from the room. "You found me," Naya whispered. "You actually found me?" They stood locked in that embrace, trembling. Before Gabriel stepped forward, keeping a respectful distance, Naya pulled back slightly, eyes widening with recognition. "Gabriela Santos?" she asked. "I remember your voice from the radio, before the signal went dead." "I'm here with your mother," he said softly, "and we heard you. We followed your light." The reunion, however sacred, could not hold back the urgency rising around them. Naya looked around quickly. "The others, did they speak to you?" "They told us what you built," Mireya said, voice full of awe. "They told us about your father." Naya's face shifted, a flicker of grief beneath her resilience. She led them toward a quieter alcove, away from the other children. "You need to understand," she said. "Dad didn't abandon us. He didn't vanish. They took us, him first. They forced him to work for them." Mireya's heart tightened. "Who?" "The traffickers," Naya said, voice hard-hatting. "They used the caves and underwater channels for moving things, drugs, sometimes even people. Dad was an expert diver. They gave him a choice, work for them or watch me die. He agreed." Mireya felt her legs weaken, gripping a rock to steady herself. "How long?" "Almost 3 years," Naya said. "He trained us at night when no one was watching, showed us how to hide, how to signal without being seen. He never stopped trying to get us out." Gabriel stepped closer. "What happened to him?" Naya paused. "He tried to send a message, hid it inside a coral sample they were exporting through a fake marine biology project. They found out, he took the fall. They killed him that same night." Mireya closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, but Naya caught her hand. "He made me promise to survive," she said. "And I did. We all did." Gabrielle took a slow breath, glancing back toward the chamber. "They're going to come looking again. The signal, someone might have intercepted it." Naya nodded. "That's why we need to move. There's a tunnel system that leads to a submerged cave on the eastern reef. It's the only way out, without crossing open ground." They gathered the children quickly, packing essentials into waterproof bags, extinguishing the fires, erasing any trace of their presence. As they prepared to descend into the tunnel, Gabriel took point, his weapon drawn. Mireya led the way behind him, illuminating the path with a glow stick she cracked in her hand. The air grew colder and wetter as they moved downward. The walls narrowed until they had to crouch, single file. Somewhere behind them, a distant clang echoed through the upper cavern, metal on stone. Someone was coming. Gabriel urged them forward faster. Just as they reached the first water chamber, a flooded hallway with no visible floor, he slipped on a slick patch of algae and went down hard, hitting his side against the jagged wall. A shout escaped him, muffled but sharp. Naya spun around, dropped beside him, checking for bleeding. "He's hit his ribs," she said. "Cracked at least 2, maybe internal bruising." "Can he walk?" Mireya asked. "Not fast," Naya replied, "and we need to swim the next section." Gabriel grimaced as he stood with help. "Go ahead, leave me here." "Not a chance," Naya said firmly. "I know this route, I'll guide you." She turned to the group, voice steady. "Buddy system, pairs. Keep low. Follow me." The current pulls hard on the second bend, so grip the chain and beg in, for a swim will follow at the next bend. So grip the chain and beg. She pointed toward the submerged anchor. The children nodded. They'd clearly done this before. Mireya helped Gabriel into the water while Naya secured a rope to his belt. Then she plunged in first, vanishing into the blackness like a shadow. One by one the group followed, Mireya last. The water was icy, the tunnel tighter than she expected. She focused on the feel of the rope in her hands, the pull of the current, the sliver of light ahead. Minutes passed like hours until she burst into the surface chamber, a dome-shaped cliffs. Naya surfaced just beside her, helping lift Gabriel onto a ledge where the children were already catching their breath. Mireya climbed up, lungs burning, heart pounding, and turned to see the flicker of flashlights bouncing in the distant passage behind them. The cliffside cavern opened to the sea like a hidden lung, its wide mouth camouflaged by craggy overhangs and reef debris. Moonlight scattered on the waves, but beneath the surface a different light flickered, deep, rhythmic, red. Naya moved quickly along the shoreline, reaching into a rock crevice where she'd hidden a waterproof switchbox. She flipped it open, then pressed a sequence of buttons. Instantly, the water just off the reef began to pulse with that same red light, soft, steady, unmistakable. The others watched in tense silence. "That's the final beacon," Naya said. "It's automated to repeat for 60 minutes. If anyone's up there, watching, they'll see it now." Gabriel, pale but alert, nodded from where he sat, propped against a rock. "You think the Coast Guard will respond?" "Not just them," Naya said. "Before the last blackout, I managed to piggyback the beacon's coordinates into a relay message. If that reached the right ears, then someone's coming." Mireya stood beside her daughter, her eyes never leaving the horizon. "It's Friday," she whispered. "He planned for this day." "He did," Naya confirmed. "He said the stars would guide them." But even as hope took shape on the horizon, danger emerged from behind. From the path they'd used to escape the inner caves, faint beams of artificial light began flickering, sweeping in a search pattern. Naya's expression hardened. "They've found the trail." Gabriel reached for his sidearm, groaning with the movement. "They'll come in from above," he said. "You said this chamber has only 2 exits?" "Reese," Naya replied, pointing toward the tide pool. "One leads to the reef, but it's underwater and tight." "Then that's your escape route," Gabriel said. "I'll hold them here." "You're not staying," Mireya said firmly. "We do this together." But Naya stepped forward. "We need someone to mark the beacon. If no one's here when the aircraft passes overhead, they might miss it. If we lose this signal, there won't be another chance." Her logic was cold, and it made sense. Mireya turned to Gabriel. "I'll stay with you." "No," Naya said, locking eyes with her. "You go. I'll stay. I've done this before." Before Mireya could protest, a sharp crack echoed from the cliff walls. A shot too close. The light patterns above intensified. Flashlights now danced across the cavern ceiling. Naya pressed a flare into her mother's hand. "If anything happens, go to the reef ridge. There's a shallow bay where the light hits twice." The group split, the younger children moving toward the water, with Gabriel and 2 older boys guiding them. Mireya hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced Naya. "I came all this way," she whispered. "Don't make me lose you again." "You won't," Naya said. "I promise." Mireya turned and followed the others into the dark pool, the cold wrapping around her like memory. They slipped beneath the surface one by one, disappearing into the reef's throat. Minutes passed. Then she heard it, the heavy churn of rotor blades, faint at first, then growing louder. A shape emerged in the sky, a dark cross against the starlit expanse, framed by the red glow blinking below. She lit the flare. Smoke bloomed orange, a spotlight cut through the dark, sweeping over the cove. It stopped, hovering. A voice boomed from the speaker. "We see you. Hold position." Naya stepped forward, hands raised, flare high. But the moment of relief was shattered by movement behind her. A figure in black burst from the shadows, lunging toward the beacon's base. Naya threw the flare, blinding him momentarily. They struggled, feet skidding across wet rock. He shoved her against the stone wall, hand reaching for the console. But before he could shut it down, a second flare lit the air. Mireya, emerging from the surf, weapon in hand. She fired a warning shot. The man fled. More footsteps followed, but so did the rescue team. Ropes dropped from the helicopter, silhouettes descending in harnesses, weapons drawn. Chaos erupted, but amidst it all, Mireya rushed to Naya's side. They embraced again, the beacon still flashing between them. Hours later, aboard the evac chopper, Gabriel handed Mireya a small, salt-stained pouch he'd found inside the cavern. "It was Julian's," he said. Inside was a folded photograph, faded but intact, of Naya at age 13, grinning in her dive gear. On the back, in Julia's handwriting, were the words, "If I don't come back, follow the stars. Keep her safe." Mireya pressed the photo to her chest, her daughter sleeping beside her, the beacon light still dancing in her closed eyes. The debriefing room aboard the Navy's emergency vessel felt sterile and disorienting after the raw intensity of Isla Sombra. Mireya sat close to Naya, who rested under a thermal blanket, eyes half open, every so often murmuring coordinates or survival protocols in her sleep. Gadley stood near the window, ribs tightly bandaged, speaking quietly to a uniformed officer who nodded solemnly and left with haste. A knock at the door pulled Mireya's attention. A tall man entered, impeccably dressed in civilian Relief Corps uniform, ID badge swinging from his neck. His name tag read, D. Lorenz, International Humanitarian Coalition. He wore concern like a practiced habit, voice smooth as glass. "We're grateful for your cooperation," he said, addressing Gabrielle and Mireya. "This operation, what you uncovered, it's bigger than any of us imagined." Gabriel narrowed his eyes. "Funny you say that, because a name just came up in one of the recovered audio logs. Your name, Mr. Lorenz." Lorenz didn't flinch, but Mireya saw it, the brief tightening of his jaw. "I'm sorry?" he asked. Gabriel stepped forward, holding a worn data card in a Ziploc pouch. "Your voice," he said flatly. "Coordinating delivery routes, using relief vessels to mask trafficking shipments." "I think there's been a misinterpretation," Lorenz began, but Gabriel cut him off. "Traced a specific vessel, the San Nie, used in a supposedly failed relief mission off the Exumas 2 years ago. That ship never broke down. It was redirected. You rerouted it." Mireya stood, voice cold. "Julian was on that vessel. That's when he disappeared. You set it up." The air crackled with tension. Lorenz took a slow step back. "You don't understand how deep this goes," he said quietly. "I kept the operation clean, organized, efficient. The chaos of rescues, of borderless waters, it was perfect." "You trafficked people under the guise of saving them," Gabrielle said. "And you tried to erase the one man who could expose you." Lorenz glanced toward the hallway, calculating, but before he could move, 2 Navy MPs stepped inside. "Mr. Laren, you're under arrest pending investigation by Interpol." He didn't resist, only looked at Mireya with a cold, surgical smile. "You can save a few, Senora," he said, "but the sea never stops feeding itself." As he was led away, Mireya sat back down beside Naya, brushing a lock of damp hair from her daughter's forehead. "We're safe now," she whispered, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. But safety was a fragile illusion. The following day, aboard the larger support cruiser, Gabriel called Mireya into the comms room. A message had arrived, unencrypted, untraceable. It consisted of just 2 lines. "J.A. alive. Isla Durmica. Injured. Send help quietly." Mireya stared at the screen, mouth dry. "It's him." "It's unconfirmed," Gabriel cautioned. "It could be bait." Using naval resources and quiet clearance through the Caribbean network, they identified Isla Durmica, an uncharted islet south of the Dominican shelf. Abandoned, off-grid, but not unknown to Gabriel. "Julian once mentioned it," he said. "He said it was a fallback zone, in case the currents ever betrayed him. A small team launched within hours. Mireya insisted on going, and Naya, though exhausted, refused to be left behind. When they arrived, the island was eerily silent. No boats, no lights, just mangroves, crushed shells, and the low thrum of wind weaving through skeletal palms. Then they found it, a crude shelter built into the cliffside, half covered by camo netting. Inside, beneath a thin wool blanket and clinging to life, lay Julian. His face was gaunt, beard wild, one leg bound in a blood-stained splint, but his eyes opened, but Mireya knelt beside him. Estrella, he whispered, using his old name for her. You came. She took his hand, pressing it to her cheek. I never stopped. Naya fell to her knees beside him, sobbing softly. Papa, she choked, you kept your promise. Julian smiled weakly. You kept all of mine. His voice faded, but the medic stabilized him, and as the helicopter ascended from the island with the three of them huddled close, Mireya reached into the pocket of Julian's coat and found something folded tightly, another photo of Naya as a child, this time sealed in plastic. On the back, in smudged ink, it read, If I don't come back, follow the stars. She's the only light I'll ever need. The next 3 weeks were a blur of coordinated search efforts, medical evacuations, intelligence briefings, and deep-sea adjustments to capture dread. Though Julian had been found alive on Isla Roja, his health had deteriorated rapidly due to untreated injuries and prolonged isolation, so the Navy expanded the operation to locate the precise site of his long-term captivity. Mireya insisted on remaining with the task force, and Naya never left her father's side, except when ordered for her own recovery. Gabriel, still bruised but functional, managed the logistics and intel flow, driven by a silent guilt that he hadn't uncovered the truth sooner. On the 21st day, the breakthrough came. A Navy submersible located an abandoned dive station 37 meters below sea level, tethered by rusted chains to the base of a craggy reef off the northern edge of the Excumas. It had once been a training facility for marine rescue drills, but had long since been decommissioned and forgotten. Inside they discovered makeshift living quarters, a cracked emergency beacon, and a shattered antenna array, clues that matched Julian's injuries and timeline exactly. From his hospital bed, Julian confirmed everything. He had been relocated after the fake San Nieves mission and left to survive in the underwater station, mostly abandoned when they deemed him too weak to escape. He had attempted to repurpose the station's outdated antenna multiple times, wiring together circuits with pieces from old oxygen tanks and dive compasses, but each attempt failed due to the corroded transmitter. I figured if I couldn't call out, I'd at least write it down and send it to the tide, he said softly, gripping Mireya's hand. Sooner or later, the ocean would speak for me. The medical team confirmed he was on the slow road to recovery, and arrangements were made for full rehabilitation in Florida under government protection, with both Mireya and Naya cleared to stay by his side throughout. 2 months later, in a quiet garden just outside a seaside recovery center in Key Largo, the three of them sat beneath a banyan tree, golden light filtering through its canopy. Julian, now stronger, wore a light jacket and used a cane, but his voice had returned to its firm cadence, and the spark in his eyes was unmistakably Julian. Mireya sat beside him, their shoulders touching, fingers entwined without needing words. Naya, older now than either parent had ever expected to witness, stood a few steps away holding a small wooden box in both hands. The others from Isla Sombra had been relocated safely, and some were being reunited with families of their own. The sun was dipping toward the horizon, the same color as the red flare light that had guided the rescue team so many weeks ago. Naya turned to face them fully, her expression unreadable at first, then softened by something deeper, release, perhaps, or resolution. There's something I kept, she said, kneeling slowly in front of them, eyes glaciating. I've carried it since the day we disappeared. I never lost it, not once. She opened the box and revealed the necklace, the abalone shell pendant, aged and dulled but intact, its leather cord still coiled like it had waited a decade for this exact moment. I didn't wear it to remember, she said quietly. I kept it so I wouldn't forget. I needed one thing that proved I was someone worth finding. She looked up at them, her voice steady now. And you found me. Julian reached out, his hand trembling not from weakness, but from the weight of everything this moment carried. Mireya placed her hand over his, guiding it as they took the necklace together. You were never lost, Julian said, tears slipping down his cheeks. You were just farther than we could reach, but never beyond our love. Naya smiled through her own tears, resting her forehead against theirs in the triangle of reunion only they could form. Around them, the sea whispered through distant palms, gulls cawed overhead, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the stars began to appear. The same ones that had once guided a frightened girl in a hidden cave to teach others how to survive. The same ones her father once told her would never lie. They had followed the stars, weathered the currents, unraveled the lies, and now, in this moment beneath the banyan tree, they were home, not because of where they were, but because of who they had found again. Home was never a place. It had always been the people they refused to stop searching for. If this story moved you, make sure to like and subscribe for more emotional and mysterious journeys like this one. What part hit you the hardest? Do you think Julian truly forgave himself? And where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment. I'd love to know your thoughts and location.